us this evening. We know it's a terrific and beautiful fall evening here in Colorado, but we appreciate you taking the time to spend with us to learn more about the Uplands Plan and really learn about how we're trying to collaborate and work with our surrounding neighbors. I do want to say that we certainly wish we were in front of you all in person, kind of having these meetings, but we all understand our continuing pandemic. We think this webinar platform is really the best way that allows us to still continue our community outreach and still hear and learn from all of you. So we again appreciate you taking the time. We've got a great early crowd here. I know that some people may be logging in, so I'll probably interrupt in the first couple of minutes here and kind of let everybody know where we're at in the presentation. But just to let everybody know, we're going to get started. We plan to have probably about 45-minute presentation here tonight. Jasper, if you would please go to the next slide. I do want to just say that one thing we want to do here is really have this interactive. We want to hear from you with your questions and allow plenty of time for question and answer. So we are saving, as I said, the last 45 minutes of this meeting to really focus on those question and answers. My role as the moderator is to hear those, to bring those questions forward and try to work with the Uplands team on who best can answer those. I do want to say in full disclosure, I'm certainly part of the team. I'm not just a moderator. I work generally on the community outreach on this team. So I'll certainly be interjecting from time to time as it comes to certain issues or if there are questions that really address things. I would like to say at this time, you can see here the screen in front of you. You all know Zoom now. We live in a Zoom webinar format, but just use that Q&A button that is circled there. That's the best way for us to hear from you. Again, we're not able to see any chat functions, so the chat functionality does not work on this. So use the Q&A. And I'm honored to introduce Sam Guzman. Sam is here to provide our Spanish interpretation. So Sam, if you would introduce yourself and please tell everybody kind of how to use the functionality here on the screen.
Yes, thank you, Marcus. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Guzman. I am here with the Community Language Cooperative, and the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice. What that means is that we want to create a space where everyone can participate and engage in the language of their heart or the language that they feel more comfortable in. We will use simultaneous interpretation to create this space. When I finish saying this statement in Spanish, we will turn on the interpretation feature and you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're not fully bilingual, we ask that you select your preferred language. If you are bilingual, feel free to listen in both languages. When you select your language, you can check mute original audio so you don't hear both languages at the same time. Hola, mi nombre es Samuel Guzmán y estoy aquí con la Community Language Cooperative y estamos aquí para ayudar y crear un espacio donde practicamos la justicia del lenguaje. Lo que eso significa es que queremos crear un espacio donde todos pueden participar y involucrarse en el idioma de su corazón o en el idioma en que se sientan más cómodos. Usaremos la interpretación simultánea para crear este espacio. Cuando termine al decir esto, activaremos la interpretación y verá un icono que dice interpretación. Si no es completa bilingüe, le pedimos que seleccione su idioma preferido para escuchar todos en su idioma. Cuando seleccione su idioma, puedes oprimir, silenciar el audio original para que no escuche ambos lenguajes al mismo tiempo. Go ahead and please select the language and I will check to make sure everyone can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Seleccione su idioma y voy a ver si todos me pueden escuchar. Denme una señal cuando lo escuche. Can we turn on the interpretation feature, please?
Okay, that has been turned on, Sam. All right. Thank you all very much. Sam, thanks for that. We are so honored to kind of present that tonight for anyone who would like to take advantage of that service. I do want to go to our next slide and keep things moving here. I want to be sure and introduce our other presenters. As I said, I'm Marcus Pochner with the Pochner Company. You will hear from Jeff Hanlon with Uplands, Bonnie Nizelik, who is our principal planner on this site. Chad Ellington will deal with a lot of the infrastructure questions and presentation, and then Eric Kornacki with the Uplands Community Collective. As I said, we believe we have about 45 minutes. If you could go to the next slide here. We will diligently work through our material and try to really present kind of a comprehensive outline of where we're headed. On the agenda slide following this, This shows a little bit of where we're headed. I think it's really important to just kind of give you a roadmap. First, we'll start with the Uplands introduction and background. I do want to say that I'm sure many of you received in the mail an invitation to this meeting. We mailed over 6,000 invites for this meeting. So there are some people who have never talked to us before or heard about this project, I am sure. So it's important that we provide a little introduction and background. We'll then transition to presentation on the amenities and the infrastructure improvements and all of those related items on our plan. And then finally, we'll finish up on the Uplands Community Collective. Next slide, please. For the trajectory tonight, where we are going, I think one thing we have really sought to do here, and we're certainly trying to be successful at that, is to try to have inclusive planning, to work with our neighbors, to work with you, to take your feedback and actually show how that is becoming and living in our plan. We're really seeking that community collaboration with all of you. So our purpose tonight is to show some of those changes made to the plans based on that community input and feedback. I do want to say two very important meetings are forthcoming. You see there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, we are going to be doing 2 design charrettes, specifically on the parks, community design, and the infrastructure, really focused on those public elements in our plan. So I will tell you at the end how to do this, but you'll be able to go to our website and join those design charrettes where we can really talk in much more detail about the parks plans. Next slide, please. This is actually a pre-meeting poll. I'm sure all of you received this. We sent an email out to everyone who registered. This allowed you to give us some initial feedback. So a couple of things I just want to point out here is you see, we asked you to basically rank the 2 issues that are most important or what you really want to learn about tonight. As you'll see, infrastructure, really learning about the streets, the sidewalks, the trails, the traffic, all of that is the first issue. Then the density and housing style. I think a lot of people think those are interrelated, infrastructure and density and housing style. And then the third item that we're certainly going to focus on tonight is really that public amenity. We also have preloaded questions that we've heard from people. I'm going to do my best during this to try to interject with some questions and continue to move us along. Next slide, please. Just here for a little outreach snapshot, if you will, of what's happened today. As you see on the left of your screen, outreach today, we have had 61 community meetings to date. We certainly have appreciated and valued that feedback from every adjacent neighborhood. I do want to say that our focus tonight is on Shaw Heights, but we've really invited a number of people from all areas of this site, everybody who's adjacent to this site, again, 6,000 people that we have invited to this. I want to draw this outreach to date. I see this comment card here that says 22, and that's kind of a low number. What I want to tell you is those comment cards are actually from the very first community meeting we did on this site almost 2 years ago. And those here on the right, this resident focus area, those were those 22 comment cards, and it showed the top 3 issues were density, traffic, and open space. This has been consistent things we have heard from the community. So this is why we have done inclusive planning. We believe this is really a great opportunity to focus on these 3 issues. The pre-poll, our first meeting, everybody focus on these 3 issues. You're going to hear us address those tonight in much more detail. Just last thing on this slide, I just want to show, sometimes we get criticized about if we flyer this or don't flyer across the street or just knock doors. We said, no, we're going to set that aside and actually just mail the entire community. So you see the 6692, those are the people that were invited. We had 74 RSVPs, and you see some of the other ways that we're trying to reach the community. Next slide, please, Yasser. So I want to thank you again for joining us. I just want to say to people who have just joined us as new participants, we have about a 45-minute presentation. I will certainly interrupt from time to time and introduce you, kind of keep you up to date on where we're at in the meeting. Right now, I'd like to turn this to Jeff Hanlons to tell a little bit about why Uplands at this site. So Jeff, if you can take the next couple of slides, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Marcus. So what I'll be talking about, I think, is, a question we get a lot, and I'll actually answer a few of the ones that were submitted to us in advance. One of the questions we get a lot is, why Uplands? Why would we come and develop this when it's an open field now? And I think it's important to understand why we would do that. Next slide, please. And what we saw in this project is an opportunity. I was talking to someone in your community this week, and they gave me a good piece of advice, which was they found the statement that we would be preserving open space by building this project offensive. And I understand why some people would consider this open space for themselves. But this isn't open space. This is privately owned land that has been farmed. And one of the things that I'll say right up front is, we're here to develop this project. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's going to be more homes near you, and there's going to be businesses near you. But the question is, and that's a template that was set by the city years ago, and I'll go over that a little bit in this slide. But what's important to understand is there is a right and a wrong, or an efficient and inefficient way to develop that land. And what we're attempting to set forth in front of you, and I think tonight you're going to hear a lot of what's changed in our plan over time. What we're attempting to do in front of you, to set forth in front of you, is a plan that you benefit from as well. Pushing parks to the perimeter was a big consideration for us. Other vistas that you considered precious as Westminster City residents or Shaw Heights residents, we saved. There is a right and a wrong way. And I think that what's really important to me is for you to understand why we think the city designated the site for this traditional mixed-use neighborhood, and why we then responded to that request. One is, and this has been backed by a lot of empirical research in the city of Westminster, we're going to create a full spectrum of housing, some housing that's missing in your city now. And the missing middle housing we're referring to, and I know that some of you that have attended prior meetings might have heard this before, but there is a dearth, there's a lack of housing types in between multifamily, multi-story apartment buildings and single-family detached conventional homes on the other end. In the middle is what we're really seeking to solve. The housing needs assessment from the city of Westminster opened our eyes a lot. And this was conducted in 2017, I believe. And it's right there at the end of your timeline in front of you. There's been an awful lot of people that have studied this land. There's been prior developers to us that have attempted to get approvals through the city. One of the things the city and that developer stepped back and did is they invited Urban Land Institute, which is a national urban planning organization, to come in and give, along with the city, a technical advisory panel, which the city participated in, on what they would like to see in this project. That led to, that project did not get built, but that technical advisory panel and some of the findings of it, and then the city took that forward years later and incorporated it into their comprehensive plan as a traditional mixed-use neighborhood. What does that mean? That means something you'd see in a traditional neighborhood within Denver. Let's say like a Wash Park or a University Park or something like that. Not downtown, not something that dense. That was a template that was set forth for us. What people may not appreciate or know about how housing or mixed-use projects work is that it is not a democratic vote at this time of the neighbors say, gosh, do we want this or not? That's not how it works. The city puts in place guidance, very specific guidance in this case, so that the landowner and industry like us know what exactly the city will permit in terms of housing and other uses. So that's why we're here. Now that we're here, what can we do that is right? One of the things we can do is fill that gap with housing. We've committed to a full spectrum. We'll have apartments in here, but you'll find that those apartments are far east in the project. Most of them will be east of Federal in Parcel C, which is where the city designated that use for. But more importantly, we're going to have a whole lot of other things, which is single family attached and single family detached, to be specific. The next thing we can do apart from housing, and I should note that we're not just building housing here. We're building a village center with neighborhood commercial, not only restaurants and cafes and other services, but civic uses that we're installing ourselves that are open to the public, that we want people to come in and participate in, public plazas and commercial buildings. That, along with all the horizontal construction, along with all the infrastructure that you'll hear about from my partner Chad tonight, is $1 billion in direct investment into your local economy. And that's just $1 billion of costs. So what it takes to construct these things, all the landscaping, it takes a lot of money to construct those things. So how do we best leverage that investment to benefit the existing community? Eric, team member of ours, is the executive director of the Uplands Community Collective. He'll be on a little later, and he'll tell you how he's taking some steps that we can actually use this investment, this $1 billion investment, to help your existing community. And what I mean by that is get folks jobs, right? It's really about how much of that spend can we keep local. Lastly, we will make large-scale public infrastructure improvements to the area, not only paths and sidewalks and traffic lights and additional lanes and bike lanes and parking, things that'll get you around in the area, but we're also adding stormwater improvements and water potable water improvements, sanitary sewer improvements, etc. In addition to 40 acres of public parks that you're going to enjoy on the best views in the project, and Uplands Parks, which the only difference between an Uplands Park and a public park is that city builds and controls the public park, and you as residents tell them what you'd like to see in that park. In the Uplands Parks, we're going to get your input on November 14th and 18th in an interactive format on what you would like to see in your Uplands parks. We're building all of that, and all of that will benefit the public. It's not a private situation. The last thing I thought, next slide, please. Last thing I thought I would go over on why we're here, and while we're here, I hope I introduced to you why we're here. While we're here, how can we do this the best that we can? We came up with these 4 principles, and I'm not going to read this slide. You can do it on your own time. But what I'd like to share with you, these 4 principles: sharing the views, connecting Westminster to all the, this is a gap that really exists between Federal Heights, Shaw Heights, and Westminster and South Adams County, trying to connect all those pieces. Provide spaces for all, whether those are small Uplands parks, some small moment of reflection in an open space, or a large, active, programmed public park. And then create home. And what I mean by that is create home for everybody, okay? All types, not just those in apartments and those in large single-family homes. But underlying that is something that I think that you'll find interesting, that from the beginning, we built this from principles from Building Healthy Places initiative. That's an initiative by Urban Land Institute. And I was attending a meeting there today, and I thought I would just reinforce that's how we met Eric, who's going to bring access to healthy food in this. But some of their other principles are building in a smart location, near public transit, which we are public transit accessible via a bus stop. And number 2, where existing infrastructure already exists. We've done that. Integrate nature. I think you'll find that this expansive number of parks are going to bring nature to you. Right now, that farm is being farmed. I grew up in a very similar situation, and I'm not throwing darts at the landowner on how they're doing it, but they till the ground every year and plant an annual, a corn or a wheat or both. What we will replace that with in the public areas and the tree lawns and the landscaped areas and the parks is perennial plantings, native plantings that establish a root system, establish microorganisms, and are much healthier ecosystem-wise. It'll also sequester a lot of carbon from the air into this project. I wanted to make sure that you understood that we, underneath these principles, we actually recruit national and international organizations to help us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our experts to actually tell you about the specifics of our planning exercise. Thanks for the opportunity, Marcus.
You bet. Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to hand it over now to Bonnie Nizelik, who's our planner. Bonnie is going to lead us through a number of slides here, actually about the site, introduce it, really look at it from a Shaw Heights perspective along the Lowell corridor. We'll start with parcel B and parcel A. So Bonnie, I'm going to let you do that. I do want to welcome attendees that have just joined us in the last few minutes. Again, we'll probably have about a 45 or 50-minute presentation here. We'll save plenty of times for questions. So Bonnie, go right ahead. If anybody does have a Q&A, use that button at the bottom of the screen and feel free, and we'll address that at the end. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Perfect. Thanks, Marcus. Jasper, if you could, perfect. Thank you. For those of you who haven't participated in a meeting For Uplands in the past, we wanted to give just a quick overview of the overall project, and then we'll get into a little bit more specifics on the parcels adjacent to Shaw Heights. So the parcels here shown are approximately 230 acres of land that are part of the Uplands community. So starting on the southwest corner, you can see parcel B at 84th and Lowell. So that is planned for residential uses and parks. Going to our east, we have what we call parcel A, the central square. That one is intended for a mix of uses with higher intensity uses being both higher density residential and commercial uses focused on the Federal Boulevard corridor. Continuing to the east, we have what's called parcel C. So that has, again, mixed use and higher density along Federal Boulevard and shifts in density down to the east as it is adjacent to the adjacent mobile home community. The very far east is what we call parcel E. That is just an open space parcel that we intend to keep as open space. And then going down to the bottom of the page, we have parcel D, which again includes some parks and view corridors. We have kind of a medium density residential shown in orange, and then some office use shown in blue. So overall, the whole community is proposed to have a maximum of 2,350 residential dwelling units and commercial that goes along with that. So just a quick overview, and then if you can go to the next slide, we're going to focus on parcel B and the west side of parcel A. So those two parcels that are closest to Shaw Heights in this meeting. So starting with parcel B, again, that's that southwest corner at 84th and Lowell. This parcel has a comprehensive land use designation of R5, which is a designation that's part of the city's plan, and it allows for a maximum of 5 homes per acre. And those homes can be single family detached, single family attached, duplexes, patio homes, townhomes, or condos. Go to the next slide. We've been working with the city for the past 2 years on what's called a preliminary development plan. So that's kind of an initial framework plan for how this parcel could be developed. So when we started looking at this in detail, we found on the city's comp plan that this triangle shown here in green is identified as a view corridor. So we are carving that 3.28 acres out as view corridor for public land dedication. Next slide. We also worked with the city and heard from so many residents about how important that southern corner of parcel B is and the views that exist there. So these 2 additional parcels, the 3.0 acre parcel on the north side of Bradburn and the 3.76 acre parcel at the very south, those are for public land dedication. So they will be owned and maintained and developed by the city. So preserved for public use. Next slide. So what we have left is what's shown here in kind of these beigey yellow colors. So these are the 2 areas where we can do residential development. So the north piece, we are proposing 5 DUs per acre, 5 homes per acre, which is consistent with the comp plan. So that allows 82 homes. And we are limiting that in use to single family attached residences, duplexes, or townhomes. On the southern end, we have another 13 acres. That is a maximum of 2 DUs per acre, and that will only allow single family detached homes. Next slide. So then moving on to parcel A. So this is kind of the centerpiece between Lowell, Federal, 84th, and 88th. This entire parcel is designated as traditional mixed use neighborhood development. So it allows a maximum of 18 homes per acre and a maximum of 1.0 commercial FAR. And so that's a square footage measurement for commercial. So a variety of uses per the city's comp plan are allowed here, including apartments, condos, lofts, townhomes, single family homes, offices, retail, commercial, and live work uses. Next slide. So again, focusing on the western half of parcel A. So you can see there's kind of a squiggly north-south road, that's Irving Street. And so we're just gonna focus on the 4 parcels on the west side of Irving in this meeting today. So similar to parcel B, the first thing we looked at was public land litigation. So working with city staff and hearing from our neighbors, making sure that that park was on the exterior of the site. So that 11-acre parcel is preserved for public land dedication to be owned and maintained by the city. Next slide. We also have requirements from the city to do private parks. And again, private doesn't mean it's not open to the public. It just means they won't be owned and maintained by the city. So the southwest corner, we have what we call the meadow, and we'll walk through just some schematic designs of that. And then where you can see the green asterisks, those are potential locations for additional private parks that will be developed once we have neighborhood layouts, lotting plans for those parcels. Next slide.
Bonnie, I'm going to interrupt just for a second here. We've had a few more attendees just join us. We're going through our initial presentation for all of you. If you can see that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can write any questions that you have for us. We're happy to answer those at the end of this presentation. Just know, as I said earlier, we're not able to see you or hear you, so feel free to use that Q&A. One thing I'll just emphasize and allow Bonnie to get a drink of water is that one thing this city has done, I think the city has done a remarkable job of reinforcing what they heard from the community about where parks and open space, where those transitions from the existing neighborhood should happen. So this has been very directed, very clear guidance about where some of those parks should end up, particularly that one in that northwest corner that we started with. So just a little feedback there, and Bonnie, go ahead again.
Perfect, thank you. So again, focusing on these 4 western parcels, you can see they're all a consistent color. These range in density from 5 homes per acre to just over 10 homes per acre. We have some plans submitted to the city, what's called a preliminary development plan and a master official development plan that shows these maximum unit counts. So the maximum unit counts that are labeled on these 4 parcels on the west side are a total of 537 units within this location. This is a key location where we've made some changes from the very first PDP we submitted. That first PDP listed approximately 770 homes on this west side of Irving. So one of the changes we made was putting these maximum limits on the amount of homes that can be developed on this west side and pushing that density closer to Federal and farther away from the Shaw Heights neighborhood. One additional thing with this half of parcel A is the residential uses that we're proposing. So this allows single family detached homes, patio homes, duplexes, and single family attached residences such as townhomes, but no multifamily and no commercial uses will be developed on this western half of parcel A. Again, they'll be focused on the eastern half closer to Federal Boulevard. Next slide. So just wanted to talk a little bit more about density. If you could go to the next slide. So again, kind of zooming out to the overall Uplands community. So the colors here are really intended to show that transition and density. So we talked just a little bit about the eastern side of parcel A, and that's where the density is along Federal Boulevard. There you go. So that kind of reddish color with the diagonal crosshatch, that's what we're calling the village center. So I'm sure we'll have some additional conversations on that in future meetings, but that's where the higher density apartments or multifamily could go, where we have some requirements for retail and mixed use shops, restaurants, things like that. So those higher intensity uses are focused along that Federal Boulevard corridor, whereas the lower intensity residential uses are intended for the western half of this parcel.
Hey, Bonnie, this is Jeff. One of our questions was how much commercial would be in that parcel A? If we could just flip back there, Jasper, really quickly. And I'm sure you could tell the listeners really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe go into, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Absolutely. So within, again, kind of that brick red diagonal hatch piece along Federal Boulevard, we're allowed up to 30,000 square feet of commercial uses. So again, that could be office uses or ground floor retail uses within a mixed use building. So it could be a coffee shop or a restaurant, things to really, help activate Federal Boulevard and that entry, and just give people the opportunity to walk to a coffee shop or grab a drink, grab dinner, things like that within the community.
And that happens to be one of the things that we're going to be asking you to weigh in on November 14th and 18th is what that looks like and the kind of flow and public plaza look. And Bonnie's did a nice job of designing it. We'll hold that till November. Thanks, Bonnie. Appreciate you doing that.
Mm-hmm. All right, next slide. So wanted to talk a little bit about housing types. We talked a little bit about single family detached and attached housing and what do these housing types look like. So here's just kind of an overall summary of different housing types. So at the top, we have single family detached. So that's one home per unit, kind of traditional single family homes. Just below that, we have our single family attached paired housing. So these are duplexes, 2 units per home. They often look like one larger home, but have 2 side-by-side units within them. Below that, single family attached. So this is a traditional townhome. Again, they're probably 2 or 3 stories, might be 3 to 6 or 7 units side by side in a row. And then at the bottom, we have multifamily attached. So this is the higher density, could be for rent, could be for sale, could be 4 or 5 stories tall. If it's located along Federal Boulevard, it might have some ground floor retail in that, but that's that higher intensity use. Next slide. So just focusing on the single family detached use, specific to these 2, parcels we've been talking about. So parcel B, the southwest corner, single family detached uses are allowed in both of those parcels. And then along in parcel A, along the west side, single family detached homes are allowed in all 4 of those parcels as well. Next slide. So then getting a little bit more dense, we're looking at paired homes or duplexes, so 2 units per home. Going back to the southwest corner, parcel B, duplexes are allowed in that north parcel on the north side of Bradburn, but they are not allowed on the south side. Those would just be single family detached on the south side. And then going back to parcel A, the west side, these duplex or paired homes are allowed in all 4 of those parcels as well. Next slide. Again, going back to parcel B in the southwest corner, we are not proposing townhomes in either of those parcels. Those are saved for duplexes and single family homes, but the townhomes are proposed or allowed in parcel A on that west side. So what you'll see is the multifamily homes at higher density, none of those are allowed in these 2 parcels we're focusing on today, but again, would be allowed closer to Federal Boulevard. Next slide. And then, oh, go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I'm going to give Bonnie a chance again to get a glass of water. I think one thing I would just want to point out there on that last slide, Jasper, if you can go back to that. I think one thing we want to do is try to be very intentional about our planning, that we're really reflective or mirroring our edges, that we're paying attention to our edges and really trying to do that. We heard from Observatory Heights, particularly that south side of Bradburn, that they wanted to see that single family or paired housing. They didn't want to see townhomes. So we think that's really right. We think it's correct, and we're trying to honor that request. I think you see the multifamily along the Federal corridor because that's what Federal has up and down the corridor in different areas. We think it's appropriate to have more density on that side and really shifting away from Shaw Heights to really honor the density that you all live in today. So we're going to go to the next focus area. Again, the reason we have these as focus areas and we're talking about them is these are the 3 issues in the pre-poll and our first meeting, as I said, all throughout that you all have wanted us to focus on. So now this is the Parks and Open Space focus.
Perfect. Next slide, please. So again, wanted to talk a little bit about some of the changes that we've made in the last 2 years working with the community and working with city staff. So the plan you see here is from our PDP from November 2018, and this shows our overall parks plan. So this darkest green park, which is up in the north side of parcel A, we are proposing a 5-acre public land dedication. So again, that would be land that would be dedicated to the city. They would own it, they would maintain it, they would help design and build that. The rest of these kind of lighter green parks were parks that we are planning to have. They would be what's called uplands parks. They would be available to the public, but wouldn't be owned by the city. So after working with staff and hearing from our neighbors, if you could go to the next slide. We've made a lot of improvement on the public land dedication. So you can see just, flipping between those two slides, how much additional dark green there is on this map. And just wanted to walk through this in a little bit of detail. So again, going back to the southwest corner of B, we talked about that view corridor on Lowell Boulevard, making sure that is preserved for the public, and those public land dedications just to the north and south of that. So again, those would be available for the public and owned by the city. We talked going through parcel A, we talked about that 11-acre park on the northwest corner and how important that was and keeping that edge green. We added an additional public land dedication. There's a 10-acre park at the entrance along Federal Boulevard at 86th. Going over to parcel C, we wanted to create break out kind of the density within parcel C. So we have an additional 3-acre public land dedication park in parcel C that can help create some connections to the existing Kamenish Park and Highland Hills Sports Complex and all the great amenities that exist there today. And then going down to the south in parcel D, we haven't talked about this one in great detail, but we can see the great views that exist looking to the south of downtown Denver. So wanted to preserve that view corridor that's identified in the comp plan and also create connections to Cobblestone Park. So Cobblestone Park exists, it's kind of tucked inside a bunch of neighborhoods. So we wanted to create connections over to that existing park and just kind of enhance those views looking across Cobblestone Park again to downtown Denver. Next slide.
This is Jeff. Jasper, could you go back to the last slide? I just wanted you to flip back and forth just to show folks from the public sort of like exactly how it's so hard. I mean, we work on it every day, but if you could just flip slowly a couple times, then folks could see just how significant the changes were. Thank you so much. I wanted to make sure. In particular, I think a lot of focus has been a lot of comments and questions have been focused on the what I'll call the sunset viewing area, and that would be along Lowell about 82nd. I just wanted you to see there, before we did not have that as public land or a park. Now that entire hilltop all the way down the hill, including the Grove and everything else, is public land. Thank you very much, Jasper and Bonnie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and just from a quantitative perspective, that first plan had 5 acres of public land dedication with a bunch of, again, what we call private parks. This revised plan has 35 acres of public land dedication plus another 6 acres of view corridor, which will also be owned and maintained by the city. They just have more limits on the structures and things that can be built within those 6 areas to, again, preserve those views. Next slide. Jeff walked through this at the beginning, our 4 guiding principles: share the views, connect Westminster, spaces for all, create home. These are all things that we continue to keep in mind as we look at the park and public land dedication spaces, and just wanted to walk you through a couple of those. So next slide. So again, our overall plan here, we're going to focus on the parcels along Shaw Heights. So what we're seeing in parcel B in the southwest and the western side of parcel A. Next slide. Some of the key things that we are focusing on as we look at the overall landscape schematic design concept for this community are using low water use. We want to use plants that don't require a lot of water, that are drought tolerant, and that are native to Colorado and the Westminster community. We want to minimize the use of sod, since that uses so much water, and utilize plant material that promotes pollinator corridors and brings butterflies and other pollinator insects to the community. Next slide. So first, the meadow, you can see in the upper right corner of the slide, this is at 84th and Lowell. So this is an initial concept for this park. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Something we can discuss in more detail at the charrette, but it includes a natural detention area. It's a little bit more of a passive park. Includes a shade structure, some overlooks, some picnic areas, and a walking path along that western edge of the community. Next slide. And then this is what we call the back porch. So this is located in parcel B, right along Bradburn Boulevard. Has a little bit more active use to it. Open lawn, a play element, possibly a hammock lounge. Again, love to see your feedback on things that you'd like to see included in some of these parks. Next slide. And then the public land dedication. So again, these are the parks that will be owned and maintained by the city. Next slide. So that Northwest Community Park, the city will have extensive outreach. We'll reach out to all of you neighbors wanting to hear amenities and programming for this park. We are happy to talk about this in our charrettes in November as well. But really want to create some spaces for multi-use fields and event lawns. We're hoping to include community gardens, sanctuary spaces. But again, would love to hear your feedback on things that you'd like to see in these public parks. Next slide. And then looking again at parcel B on the west side and that sunset viewing spot, we certainly want to maintain that view. That's of the utmost importance. But from there, creating places to sit, maybe a sledding hill, just passive areas for residents of Uplands and the surrounding community to connect and enjoy that view.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie. Now we're going to have Chad Ellington join us to talk a little bit about the infrastructure, just kind of a housekeeping or agenda for everyone. We're mostly through this. We have about 15 slides left. I know we want to spend a little more time and talk about infrastructure, so we may run a little long on our presentation. We'll certainly save time. We've gotten a number of questions here in the last few minutes, so we'll work through those. So Chad, if you would lead us through the infrastructure discussion, please.
Will do. My name is Chad Ellington. Marcus, just a thumbs up if you can hear me fine.
You're doing great.
Great. Again, Chad Ellington with the Uplands team. Thanks everybody for being here. I think we'll go through this pretty quickly, and it's a pretty easy statement. We've said it repeatedly in our public hearings and all of our efforts with staff, but Uplands literally is paying its own way for the development. We are not passing costs along to existing residents in any way, shape, or form, be that upfront cost, taxes, or any rates or fees or anything. So again, Upland residents in the future kind of pay for the infrastructure, and it's its own way. I'll go into that a little bit more. We are investing hundreds of millions of dollars through this project, and that doesn't come from us. It's not like that's a check that's written from one entity. That's a large scale development of this size with so many partners and developers and end users, commercial, retail tenants, and so on and so forth. So it's a long range project. It takes a lot of resources to build these type of things, and we're working on something that everybody will be very proud of. I wanted to just go through kind of the high points here. The roadway and pedestrian connections, our goal is to enhance safety improvements from the word go. We obviously add to traffic, but we work through the city's process with their defined traffic guidelines and third-party professionals on how that all works. We will, in fact, improve existing safety deficiencies and traffic deficiencies that are out there today. And And so that's a big goal of the project, is to provide for safety, lighting, increases traffic movement, smoothing, and then pedestrian connections across the site and around the site. Sanitary sewer improvements and storm drainage improvements are the next two bullet points there. Those really do go hand in hand together. There are impacts of this development that will impact the existing facilities in the city, and so Uplands pays its own way for those things. We've been working with the city and third-party consultants on the city's system from a whole, and we have identified areas that need to be upsized or fixed or improved along the way to facilitate our development and then the longevity of the city's facilities. Storm drainage, there's an existing problem on Shaw Boulevard today that everybody that lives on Shaw Boulevard knows, that it floods. We actually detain more storm drainage on our site than currently happens today. We will work with the city on improvements along Shaw Boulevard to fix existing floodplain issues and provide for the safer passage of water. It's really a standard development process that a project like this goes through. Water infrastructure, we are strengthening the city's water system and adding redundancy. So when a project like this comes to any municipality, you literally do cross ties across the site and strengthen the city's existing water system infrastructure. I don't know how many folks are have been tuning into the last couple of water study sessions that City Council's been having, but if you have tuned into that, or you can find the information on their website, you'll see the aging system in Westminster is becoming a real problem, and we absolutely will be part of the solution there in a couple different ways. Number one is fixing existing deficiencies and investing in infrastructure upgrades throughout the city that benefit the whole city at Uplands costs. And then the next bullet point dives into it a little bit more about new tap sales. So water and sewer tap sales are how the city funded its infrastructure to begin with. And that aging system is aging, and there's an increasing maintenance cost, which has been unfortunately passed along to ratepayers these days. So we hope that our tap sales will help the city's coffers and their ability to maintain maybe a little bit better or faster or quicker, or not all on the backs of the ratepayers, to maintain the existing water system in the city. So that is what kind of the overall general synopsis of really Uplands paying its own way. Again, no pass-throughs, no games, no tricks. The city's not paying for any of our infrastructure. We pay for it 100% of the way. One of the questions that was asked was regarding a metropolitan district. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that. The city does have a process for that funding mechanism. It's one of the toolkits in any development of this size is toolbox. And we are in the early stages of working with the city on that. But the important part, I think, that is a misunderstanding commonly is that this property will impact your sales taxes, and that's not true. The existing residents would not be involved in any sort of a metropolitan district or a special district taxing. If that does happen, it would be borne by the future residents of Uplands, and it goes to repay for the infrastructure, parks, trails, open space, all the enhancements that we're talking about here. And then the infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier, is really paid for by a number of parties. It's our builder partners, our home builder partners that are building streets and lots and improvements to the existing traffic flows, builders, commercial, retail developers, homeowners, and rental tenants, and so on and so forth, office tenants. So there's a huge team here that funds the infrastructure. We've gotten a lot of questions about how that's funded. I just want to be clear that that's really a team effort. Next slide, we'll go into the community edges. Just thought it would be beneficial to walk through in some.
Hey, Chad.
Go ahead,
Sorry to interrupt. This is Jeff. Could you answer one question for a user or a viewer that asked? They see some cost sharing mentions in your documents, in your entitlement documents, and since you just went over how we bear our own costs, can you explain the cost sharing language in any of our documents? Thank you.
Happy to. There is a common term that's used in development agreements and probably exists somewhere in our preliminary development plan about cost recovery. or sometimes it's referred to as cost sharing. But largely, that is a mechanism where in a development like Uplands is having to front costs for, I'll use 88th Avenue as an example, east of Federal. There's probably a parcel to the north of 88th that would someday be redeveloped. But the requirement of the city is that we would build that road out completely as a part of our project. And so the cost recovery is a developer term for if a future adjacent parcel were to develop, that developer could owe their fair share of that back to the Uplands development in one way, shape, or form. I want to be clear that that is not coming from the city. There is no cost recovery from the city or cost sharing with the city. There is no cost or recovery sharing with any existing residents in the city. So it's really a future developer coming in and making improvements that we've already paid for, basically like a refund or a cost recovery to the Uplands project to get their fair share of that paid back. So if that answers that question, we'll move on to the community edges. We thought it would be beneficial to walk through parcel A. Next slide, Jasper. Parcel A mainly, I think we went, yeah. So this is again, streetscape. So street treatments, we'll just kind of walk through the 4 main streets that surround parcel A. So on the west side of parcel A is Lowell Boulevard. Lowell Boulevard will be improved. We often say upsized or widened or things like that, but the reality is we're making it a safer condition. Today, if you live on Lowell Boulevard, you know that you back out of your driveway right into a travel lane. And in different parts of it, some places there are parking, some places there are not, but it is a challenging situation. What we do is improve that traffic flow through there. So working with the city and third-party traffic engineers to add bike lanes and parking lanes on both sides. The roadway gets extended to the east into the Uplands property. So your existing curb and gutter kind of location stays on the west side if you live on Lowell. So when we talk about traffic improvements, we talk about a wider section. It's a safer section. It provides for bike travel. And then on the Uplands side as well, the east side, you'll also see quite a bit of pedestrian improvements from what exists today. So sidewalks, trails, and pathways for pedestrians that are not in the street section. Moving on to this federal section, this is really just indicative of half of the road. So you'll see the median on the far right there. There are 3 travel lanes. So this is a project that is underway and being studied by the city, Adams County, and other local municipalities participating in what's called a transportation and mobility study. CDOT controls the Federal Boulevard right-of-way, and we are working with them to identify how signalization would work at 86th, 88th, 84th, all the improvements that are overdue, frankly, for improvements and upgrades, and then how those turn movements work. But rest assured, there is a big focus on the entire federal corridor, not just from 88th to 84 through the boundaries of our project. So we will be participating in that study, have been participating in that study, will participate financially in the federal upgrades adjacent to the property. And you can look for some major improvements in the federal corridor from 36 all the way up to 104th along the way here. So that's really those 2 northwest areas, and we'll move to the next slide. North-south rather. So these are the east-west collectors that border the property, the main piece of the property. So 88th, starting on the left. Again, there will be bike lanes added to existing conditions today that are pretty, in some places, dangerous. We have a middle median turn lane, which will be an improvement. The travel lanes will stay as is, east and west. And then we'll have allow for parking along the north property boundary of the Uplands project. And then the sidewalk and landscape buffers, all that happens on our property. So from today's, if you went out on 88th today, you would see that this road section will have to grow to the south onto the Uplands property, and that's exactly what will happen. So it does get widened and improved into the Uplands project. 84th on the south side, again, main focus between Lowell and Federal, and then east of Federal along parcel D. We, same kind of treatment. We have travel lanes, turn lanes, bike parking, tree lawn, sidewalk on the property into the landscape buffer. So those are kind of the highlights of a lot of the existing roadways that are surrounding the property and their future upgrade opportunities for widening and traffic safety improvements.
Great. Thanks, Chad. I'm going to keep these slides handy, Jasper. I'm sure there'll be questions about these. Our last speaker, folks, you've been very patient. We have not lost an attendee yet, so I appreciate all of you diligently following. Our last speaker, as I said, is Eric Kornacki with the Uplands Collective. We have only 4 or 5 slides, and then we'll get to Q&A. So, Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. It's a problem with going last as you get squeezed for time, but I'm excited to be here tonight and to talk about the Uplands Community Collective. The Uplands Community Collective, as Jeff mentioned, is a nonprofit that was created to leverage the Uplands development into strategies to build a place-based economy where all people can thrive and prosper. And as Jeff mentioned, I think we have an opportunity, and I would add to that, just say an obligation, to ensure that the $1 billion plus investment that Uplands is bringing into the community is invested as much as it can be locally and creates an opportunity for all residents. So that's really the kind of mission of the Uplands Community Collective. Our strategies to accomplish that include building a community food system, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about tonight. We've had some interest in hearing more about some of the farming and community gardening and food programming that will take place on site. Some of our other strategies, which I presented back in July, include workforce development. That's to ensure that we are building a construction pipeline and pulling in as many of those jobs that are going to be given out and building these homes over the next decade, as many of those as we can get into the local community, creating training programs, apprentice programs, certification programs to do that. Also, small business development, working to ensure that existing small businesses are capitalizing on this new growth, that they're well positioned, and that aspiring entrepreneurs have the resources and technical support and capital to really start a business out of all this growth and really succeed. And then the last is civic engagement. That community engagement, particularly community engagement driven by food and bringing food together, both in the growing, cooking, sharing of food is really important. So next slide, Jasper. Now, I know that this site holds a great value to the community. There's obviously a lot of people passionate about the fact that it's been a farm for 100 years. And I mentioned back in our July community meeting that I looked at this farm site almost a decade ago. I was looking for an urban farm within the city or within the Denver metro area and found this incredible piece of property. Even with national and federal and local funding and the help of a community land trust, there was no way that we could ever make the economics of it work. We also realized that it had been zoned for development, and so it really wasn't a suitable location for agriculture in perpetuity. That said, as you heard from Jeff, Uplands values agriculture and the importance of preserving the agriculture uses on the site. And so I see that as one of the greatest challenges and really responsibilities of the Uplands Community Collective is to figure out how to preserve a portion of this site as a working farm. So as you can see from some of the pictures here, we have a vision to preserve a portion of it as a working farm and utilizing a lot of existing small-scale intensive organic practices that are very much in line with regenerative and permaculture practices, but then also looking at 21st century growing techniques. You'll see a picture here of an indoor hydroponic farm that's in a shipping container. And so for 2021, we're working to put together a plan to do a pilot farm site, emphasizing hands-on education with youth, also looking to launch a beginning farmer training program that will provide mentorship, support, and ground for aspiring farmers so that they can actually begin growing food. And pandemic willing, hopefully we can begin having community events and celebrations, weekend farmers markets, that type of thing. We're also currently working with partnerships with local nonprofits, industry leaders, farm advocacy organizations, schools such as Westminster High School. We help their CTE program. They've got a great food and farm and culinary program. Receive a very competitive national grant from the US government, and that's going to be connected to some of our programming, as well as our food assistance organizations in the surrounding communities such as Growing Home and Food for Hope. And Just to be clear that these are all proposed uses. In order to permanently preserve agricultural production on the site, it will need to be part of the public land designation that you heard mentioned earlier in the presentation, and that will be determined by the city and through the city's processes. So we're currently working with Parks and Rec to understand their processes and priorities, but it's really going to take the support and involvement of the community that's passionate, that wants to keep part of this as a working farm, and to really make this a working farm, a community working farm for the first time in its history. Next slide, please. A little bit about community gardening. You saw in some of the parkscapes that Bonnie mentioned that, or that she showed, that community gardening is also another key component of preserving agricultural production on this site. Community gardening is going to be smaller but yet meaningful ways for residents to be involved. Also really focusing on the schools in the nearby area and getting kids involved in growing and cooking food as well, and getting them excited. And if you've seen any of the recent news, Denver Urban Gardens, who is just a mainstay within the Denver metro area, they've been doing community gardens for over, I think, almost 50 years now. They recently had to sell off some land that was a community garden in order to keep their financial, or their organization afloat. The community gardens that we're proposing would be part of the Uplands amenities, and so this would be a permanent fixture of the site. Next slide. And then kind of looking at the way that we can impact our surrounding community, we are looking at a household garden model that is something that I developed in Southwest Denver a decade ago. And that's really looking to convert yards into food producing gardens. We know water is a big issue for many families right now that are watering sod, but gardens, and particularly gardens when you have a drip irrigation system in place that's on a timer, actually save up to 66, or they use 66% of the water that's required of using or watering a lawn. So in addition, we can save water on lawns, but we can also grow food to feed a lot of the families that we know are struggling in the pandemic. We've seen a huge increase of food insecure families that are turning to food banks and food assistance organizations. Having a garden at your home growing food, even if it's half of the year, is a proven best practice to increasing access to healthy food, but also consumption, saving water, and saving money at the same time. Next slide, Jasper. And finally, we're looking at food retail and the food economy. Numerous grocery stores, as we know, have closed in the area. That puts more families at a disadvantage that maybe don't have a reliable transportation. They have to travel further to grocery stores, and we believe grocery stores are a critical anchor in the community. And so the Uplands Community Collective and Uplands are working to attract a grocery retailer back to the area. And what we're generally hearing is that new households that Uplands would provide would be an incentive for them to come back into the area. So more households generally increase the demand for groceries, as well as other goods and services. Also, the collective would be working with that retailer to make sure that they take SNAP and EBT so that we can ensure that all members of our community have access to healthy food. I have a picture here of a Double Up Food Bucks program that we're involved with, that if you purchase qualifying food using SNAP at that retailer, you basically get, it's buy one, get one free up to $20 per shopping trip. Finally, we're looking at sort of like small format pop-up retail, such as farmers markets, food stands, little food kiosks, a couple of pictures you see here, food trucks and whatnot. And so it's really about using food as an anchor for community gathering, local business development, and access to healthy food. So I know we're probably short on time. Thank you for letting me go a little long, Marcus.
Oh, no, you did great. Thanks very much for covering that. I think that's very important information for the community, and certainly something we've heard and want to, again, incorporate to this. So I want to say we've still got all the attendees with us. Thank you very much for your patience. We went a little long on that, but we're going to work diligently. I'm going to encourage all of our teammates here or panelists to answer quickly. We don't need long answers here, so we can try to get through them. We have about 30 questions. First one, I think just jump in as you're ready. What is the anticipated completion date for the Parcel 1 park? That is the large park on the northwest corner of Parcel A.
Marcus, I can take a stab at this one.
Go right ahead.
This is Bonnie. So that Northwest Park in Parcel A is public land dedication. So we'll be dedicating that to the city, and they will lead charrette efforts to design that. And the ultimate timing of that construction will be up to the city.
Great. And maybe just to follow up on that, Bonnie, there's a question about what's the timeline of the overall project. Can you maybe just walk through what we're doing on the planning process and the timeline of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing right now, we're kind of doing two steps. One is called a preliminary development plan. So that covers all the parcels here that are part of Uplands. It creates the overall framework for Uplands. It identifies where the public land dedication is, where the private parks are located, this street network that you see here, and it establishes overall densities, what types of homes can show up in each of these parcels, things of that nature. So that's part of the city review. It's on the city's website right now. It's in review. We're continuing to work with staff on that. And so that covers the entire 230 acres. At the same time, we are doing what's called a master official development plan. So that is just for Parcel A, because Parcel A has a different land use designation, that traditional mixed use neighborhood development. Just provides a little bit more detail on what we envision that parcel to look like, specifically focusing on that, higher intensity use along Federal Boulevard, what we call the Village Center, where the retail mixed uses might end up.
Great. I'm going to come back, and this, Bonnie, maybe you or Jeff, but the first question we got tonight was, how will people on the east side of Federal still be able to enjoy the view of the mountain? So again, primarily on the east side, how are we incorporating those view corridors?
I mean, I'll let Bonnie talk from a planning perspective. I guess just from a development perspective, the folks that are east of Federal, at least south of 86th, are all commercial uses. So that would be, or commercial or civic. So that would be Crown Point Academy and Summit Square Shopping Center. North of 86, there's actually open ground there. And on the other side of it would be a 3-story. I think those are called Prospect or Point, if I'm not mistaken. And those are a condominium. Mm-hmm. And so what those folks would see is a building type pretty similar to theirs near them. And so that's what the city has dictated in C. And so to the extent that block those folks' view, and I'm not sure if that person was asking about that particular building's view, but some of those views are going to be impacted, but you'll still be able to look over the entire site. The site runs from east to west downhill, and you'll get to see all those parks and all that stuff. So it's not going to be completely it's not going to obscure their view, but it will not be the same in the sense that buildings like theirs will be around them.
Yeah, one thing I think I would add, and I'll just say this for Parcel C, so just across Federal, I think that's kind of the question is, that's something that we will really look at as we design that that product, that multifamily units there. I think Jeff is absolutely right. Existing, there's a school and retail. So we want to provide actually more opportunities to capture those views. So we'll build that into the site plan of the actually developments. I think the other thing, and Bonnie can talk about this, but as you come off of Federal and into Parcel A, you see kind of that central gathering place. That is really about capturing those views, preserving those views, and honoring those views. So I think that's really where it is. It may change a little bit on some of the corridor, but actually pulling people into the site to protect those is an important part of this. I think I'm going to go down here. Next question is, I would like to know if you plan to build just houses, or is there a plan to have shops, restaurants, bars, and parks as well?
I can take that one. So this is a great slide. Again, the green showing the parks, both the darker green is the public land dedication, and the lighter green is some of the private parks. Those might shift within the parcels as we develop, but commitment to both the public land dedication and the private parks. And then from a mixed use perspective, again, that's really focused on Federal Boulevard at 86th. So the incorporation of retail, coffee shops, restaurants, things like that. And then the west side of Parcel C along Federal Boulevard also has a mixed use designation. So the key piece that it's important to us, and it's important to the city. I think it's important to the future people who will live here, and hopefully the residents who live here today, is providing walkable access for people to use retail spaces and, go to a restaurant, things like that.
Yeah, one thing I think I'd add to that, and just to remind everybody, we're trying to focus tonight. We covered so much material, but really on Shaw Heights. So we talked really about that area closest to Shaw Heights. That is residential because it reflects your residential nature. Then there's this more mixed use kind of neighborhood serving retail that comes along the federal corridor. So we have all those. Sorry, we didn't focus a lot on that tonight. A specific question, Bonnie.
Marcus, real quick,
Yep,
I just
go
want
right
to
ahead.
inject. This is
Go right
Jeff.
ahead.
One of the things I'll give that person is an opportunity to go to our website right now and go to the resources page, and you'll see our most recent schematic design package has been posted there. And if you click on that, it's a large PDF, and Bonnie's firm, Norris Design, did a very nice job of putting together schematics exactly of that village center that you're asking about. So that's what we're going to be asking you to weigh in on November 14th and 18th, is the aesthetics and function of those types of things. The village center being one of those, but those other parks being plenty of others. So please go to our website, go to that PDF. You'll be able to find details on the village center, and I hope that helps. Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think these two next questions are really related. So the first one, Bonnie, is about parks. How is the city, no, excuse me, where there will be a park conserving the current access to mountain and sunset viewing from 82nd and Lowell? So there at Observatory Heights, will there be a park at that area?
Yes. So I don't know if we can zoom. Jasper, are you able to zoom in on that area? Maybe.
Go ahead, Bonnie. We'll come up with a slide there, but.
So yeah, that 82nd, if you could shift down a bit. So that is all public land dedication and parks. So just at the intersection of 82nd is right where that view corridor, that 3.2 acre view corridor and 3.7 acre public park kind of meet. So all those two shades of green, all that will be dedicated to the city. The view corridor limits structures can't be built in there, but the PLD has a little bit more opportunity to build shade structures, things like that. But all that green space in those general locations will be dedicated to the city for public use.
That's great. And there was a follow-up about the top of that. Are we protecting that area there on Lowell? So yes, we are. We've been very clear about the difference between PLD and view corridor. So the city will work on what actually the elements are in the PLD, but that area on the hill there in Observatory Heights will absolutely be protected for those pretty remarkable views. Next
And Marcus,
question.
there's a later question, I think maybe one or two, that loop back to this parcel, loop back to this park. And there's I'll answer those so we don't have to go through them really quickly since we're on it and we have the slide up. There's a division of opinion amongst the residents, and that is that some folks want to see that as a bit of a nature preserve, like an open space that's not disturbed at all, and they don't want folks in there to speak of, other than maybe a trail or two. And yet there's a lot of folks that would like to see parking, and bocce is one example that we've gotten, sledding hills, and more active uses. The beautiful thing is that you, the residents, get to decide what's in that park. And you're going to give that feedback to the city when the city starts designing and building that park. So the good news is, it's not that we don't have a dog in the fight, not that we don't care. We have our own opinions. But that's only so important because it's your opinion that's going to determine what's built in that park. That's it, Marcus. Thank you.
Terrific. Probably the worst segue I've ever used. The next question is there a possibility of a dog park here on the site? Sorry, Bonnie, I made you laugh, and maybe you're not able to answer right now. Yeah.
We've had that request a lot for a dog park, a public dog park. The city of Westminster had thoughts on where their dog park assets already were. Excuse me. And Federal Heights, which is the location where Kamenish and Karstens Park to the northeast there, they control that. And they had their own ideas again on where their public parks should go regionally. And this was not one of them. From a public park dog park perspective, that's probably not something that is going to happen unless the public comes through with their feedback to the city and says, we'd like to see some of this 40 acres of PLD and view corridor be dog park. And in that event, I think that's a possibility. But from our perspective, Upland's building a large public dog park. That's probably not going to happen. We're exploring some smaller dog parks, but I hope that helps. For now,
Yeah,
that's what we know about
I mean,
dog
and
parks.
I think that's a great answer. The one thing was talk about those PLDs, encourage the city. If that's a use that neighbors really want to see on this site, that's something to really involve in that. This next question is a little bit about infrastructure. Frankly, it's probably too far ahead, but the infrastructure question is, will there be things like 5G, the technology of that, or high speed bandwidth into the development? So Chad, are we already planning or looking at those kind of improvements that will be added into the neighborhood?
We are, yes. There's a lot of different early technology efforts. We're looking at all best-in-class ideas for bringing all types of great infrastructure to the project. So yes, absolutely yes is the answer.
Terrific. Very good. And we'll come back to everybody. We certainly don't know the providers. That was the second half of that, but we'll go through that process at the right time. This is a question actually about the school district. So how many additional school rooms are anticipated to be needed? I think that's probably a fair question if you say how many additional students are generated from this development, and does that have an impact on the existing schools in the area?
On that question, Marcus, I think we would probably punt that question to Dr. James Duffy, who handles operations for the Westminster Public School District. And he made remarks in our last public hearing that they have the capacity for all the incremental students in their existing buildings. So there is no incremental building capacity that he has determined, or this district has determined, is necessary. In fact, his attendance has been dropping and the capacity of those buildings has been far under capacity. So it's just going to help them a lot. To be frank, this is going to be a massive injection into their budgets annually. And they've made that very clear. And they've made it very clear that they're in support of this project. Get more kids into their schools is going to reinvigorate that. Thank you.
Terrific. And we will defer to the school district to kind of go through that. They have a very true methodology of how they determine that. One thing I just want to say, when we answer a question in writing, you all are able to see that. So actually, I'm seeing a lot of questions that are getting answered and moving over. So if I miss one of your questions, I apologize. Again, we'll have a list of the Q&A at the end of this that we publish in the next few days that'll have our responses there. So next question I'd like to say here is, let's see, was the park changes, I'm just going to read this question. It's kind of a little inflammatory, but I'll read it. The park change was only done to pay off the school district. Can somebody address that question? The park changes that we had from our initial iteration to where we are today, was that being done for the school district?
I'm happy to answer it, or you guys can weigh in, but the answer is no. I mean, and flat out, absolutely not. We worked with the city residents and a lot of community feedback we've had to date that asked for more parks, trails, and open space. And we went from the 5 that was initially requested by the city to 40. The school is a totally different issue. And as Jeff alluded to, we worked with Westminster Public Schools on whether or not they would need land for an additional school, or whether or not the new student generation from the Uplands project would help bolster their existing declining student population. And it was the latter that they requested. And so we pay a ton of school fees, we pay a ton of park fees throughout the development of the project, but no parks. And parks is a deal with the city. They will take those parks and own them forever. It has nothing to do with the school district.
Terrific. I'm going to go back to an earlier question, and I might just address this, and Bonnie or Jeff fill in. The question was, in what ways will you be preserving open space, parkland, and views within the development? I think this was probably asked very early on. We've spent a lot of time focused on that. The map that's actually in front of all of you really does that. So I think that has been inherently focused on what we've tried to do here. So we agree with you. Those views deserve to be protected, and we hope we're hearing you and really incorporating where those parks and those view corridors should be located. So this is a kind of a more general question, and I think it's a fair question in just how infrastructure works. So how does Westminster going to meet the needs of the increase in population, such as water and traffic and schools? We just addressed schools. I think as we heard, the district actually has the ability to absorb the students, is looking forward to additional new students. But maybe Jeff or Chad, you handled this earlier, talk again just about the water and the traffic. How does the city absorb the additional traffic and water usage here on the site?
I'll take traffic first. So traffic, as I mentioned earlier, like we work through the city's traffic criteria with third-party engineers. These are detailed folks that have engineered every city and every street in the city, or all the cities in the metro area. And there are certain incremental improvements that are done to roadway improvements as population grows, as traffic patterns change, and those things. So we work through that and with the city's traffic department to identify the needs and go through those on a case-by-case basis and study the whole impacts of the project. Regarding water, the project, this project was given a water budget before our involvement, and we have honored that water budget, and we've had to lower density. We've done some things with using water conservative plants and smaller lots and all of that to make sure that we're going to meet or beat the water budget that the city gave us in terms of water requirements of the project. And then in terms of infrastructure on how the water moves through the site, that's all, again, an engineering exercise that's done with civil engineers and working with the public works department at the city on how that infrastructure is done to make sure safe drinking water and everything is priority one.
Oh, sorry. You got it. Thank you. I think there's a couple of quick just parks questions. Again, this probably goes a lot to the PLDs, but are there basketball courts planned in any of the park areas?
I think that's a great point. We're taking notes on all the, kind of programming ideas for the parks, both the public land dedication and the private parks. So we'll take note of that. We'd love to hear additional feedback like that in the charrettes in November, and encourage everyone to make their wish list for the public land dedication for the city's design process as well.
Great. Jasper, if you could go back to the Lowell Street section, the street width there. There's a couple of questions about Lowell, so I'm just going to focus on that. So if it's Chad or Todd, first of all, the question is, what is the total width there from curb to curb on Lowell Boulevard? That's probably quick math. So if somebody wants to pull that up, that would be great.
The curb to curb dimension, Marcus, is anywhere between 47, 48 feet roughly.
Great. And then there was kind of the comment of that. So I think, again, I just want to be clear. We've struggled to say this clearly to folks. Again, we will be widening that, adding the parking, the bike lanes and so forth that you see in this dimension by going into our site, right? So of course your property line stays where it is. Somebody made the comment that it looks like we'll still be backing into traffic. I just want to be very clear. The left side of that now shows parking and then a bike lane and then the traffic lane. So you will not be backing into traffic. That is a very substantial change and something we think is really beneficial to those neighbors that face onto Lowell. That is a pretty substantial. And Todd, maybe if you can just talk about the width there of that parking and bike lane, so that additional footage that we're adding in.
Yeah, the parking lane's about 8 feet wide. That goes from the curb face out to that line, and then the bike lane's an additional 5 feet. So you actually have about 13 feet in there roughly before you get to the travel lane, which was, probably something less than that today. Of course, there's no bike lane there today, and you're getting parking that's even closer to that travel lane than what we're proposing.
Terrific. And Todd, I may just keep you. There's been a number of questions. Folks, we have about 8 minutes left. I so appreciate you hanging in there. We're trying to work through these questions really quickly. Jeff, Todd, there was a question about our traffic study. Why is it not current? Can you just tell people when you do a traffic study and how that goes through the process with the city and how they tell you the improvements that are necessary for a development?
As far as it being current, we just resubmitted that with our last submittal. The counts were done about 2 years ago, which is actually good for us because it was difficult to do counts within the COVID time because the numbers went down by 30 to 50% in most areas, and they're not actually back to where they were before. So the traffic counts are actually better or more conservative for us. So we go through that analysis with the city. The city has criteria on what we're supposed to look at. We've monitored and analyzed each one of the signalized intersections that are out there today. So Federal 88th, 88th Lowell, 84th and Lowell, and Federal and 84th. And then we take our traffic generation that we're going to have for the site and we apply that along with all of our improvements. So it's not just taking the existing roadways out there. We're actually taking into account all these roadway improvements that we're doing, safety improvements, any additional turn lanes, and signal upgrades that we may be doing at these intersections. And then we go back and look at what's called a level of service. And in looking at most of these situations, it's not till 2038 that some of them start to drop a grade. So most of them are in this B to C category at signalized intersections. And there's really not one that goes to the E and F categories. And most times when an intersection falls to an E or F category, it's not the entire intersection. It's actually just the left turning movements that are delayed, which cause the overall intersection grade to go down. So we've actually done that analysis as well and showed that, hey, that's really only 2 cars that are sitting there trying to turn left. It's not that the whole intersection is failing really. And these all fall into the criteria of the city. Again, these are levels of service that the city dictates on what type of improvements are needed when they're and when they're needed. And so this traffic report falls into the acceptance of what that criteria is. And the city has reviewed this now twice and given us feedback.
Great, Todd. I think I just want to add for everybody, that is something, infrastructure traffic, we will continue. That's one of our topics at the design charrette, so we'll go into that more detail. I will say, Bonnie, I think this is a really fair question and maybe why we should provide some edification. The question is, in the current master plan, parcel A, the large parcel, why do the new streets, the proposed streets, not align with the existing streets or roadways on the west side of Lowell?
Jasper, could you maybe go to one of the master plan streets? And just the overall answer is we're trying to minimize cut through traffic as much as possible. If there is a clear and direct straight line from Federal to Lowell and internal to the community, it's just going to promote cut through traffic on these smaller roads instead of focusing the traffic on the bigger roads such as Federal, 88th and 84th. So we were trying to A, minimize that cut through traffic, and then B, keep, if you are driving from the west side from Shaw Heights into this community, we wanted to create more opportunities for those residents to drive towards green space such as parks, things like that, instead of just into streets and other homes.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate and kind of emphasize this. This is actually something we think is really responsive to the neighborhood. You are correct. It would provide a better grid pattern, but cut through traffic is not something we wanted to encourage into Shaw Heights. So I think this was very intentional not to align those streets. We can certainly talk about that, but we thought that was better for the neighborhood. I am going to say we're going to cover a couple of water questions as there's a number of them here, but maybe this one, Eric, or whoever would like to take this. How will you combat the urban heat island effect? Will all structures have solar panels on them?
I can take that one. No, solar panels will not be required on all of them. I'm assuming that some builders might deliver that as an option, but it wouldn't be required. And the other thing I would talk about with regards to heat is that, right now, the way it's currently farmed, there's carbon being released all the time and heat because it's dirt. Now, the impermeable spaces that we're going to be installing will no doubt add to that equation. But all of the vegetation that we're adding as well has a cooling effect and a carbon sequestration effect. So I don't actually know the questioner's answer specifically, empirically, on have we done that calc. We've looked at it. But I can tell you there's definitely an offset for impermeable spaces that you do install. You are installing a permaculture, a perennial that's going to be there for a long time. And that does have quite a bit of an offset. But I don't have the exact answer for you.
Yeah, no, that's
and
terrific.
Solar, will be an option.
I think that's just, we talk a lot about our sustainability, and we can go into more details how we're trying to bring sustainability to this site. So a question I just want to bring up here, we're just about out of time, but when was the water budget issued by the city of Westminster to you? What year was this allocation made for the Upland site, or at least for this site in total?
The history of the water is pretty clear cut. and I want to make sure everybody understands how that happened. You know, in 2007 and 2008, there was another developer that was working with this same landowner to develop this parcel. As I mentioned before, the city had not yet put really clear guidelines of what they'd like to see here. And so that happened in 2013. Notwithstanding that, in 2007, I believe, there was a conditional allocation of a water budget for this project, equivalent of about 2,400 residential units equivalents. So around 2,400 units. That happened, you know, 13 years ago or so. In 2013, what's important to understand is then they incorporated that water budget into the integrated comp plan and water plan that have been integrated. And it hasn't been integrated for every single parcel, but for a major parcel like this, the city planned for it and budgeted this water. And it's been around a long time. And we got that same budget given to us. No increase on that budget from back then. Hope that answers your question, Marcus.
Yeah, and
And
I
then
think
they've reiterated that in public hearings. The city staff and management has reiterated that in public hearings on the source and the budget for the water, where it came from.
terrific. Folks, I am going to try to hold the line here and end this meeting at 7:30. We are right at 7:30. We got through a lot of questions. I know there was one individual who provided about 30 questions, so I tried as rapidly as I could to work through them. I know I have missed some questions. I apologize for that. We will put those out there and go through that. I do want to say to all of you, you know, as part of the team members here, I think it is so important for us to continue to hear this feedback and find ways to incorporate it. So one thing I want to say, and it's on your slide now, is to really look at these next two design charrettes that are focused on the parks and infrastructure. On Saturday, November 19th, we're going to be doing an hour-and-a-half design charrette. A charrette, by definition, is to allow you to give us feedback, to sit literally around a table. Unfortunately, it'll probably be around a Zoom, to give us feedback on some of those park elements, the basketball courts, the dog park, all those things, some of those things you talked about, to allow you to plan with us. We're going to do the next one on Wednesday, November 18th. So those are really vital meetings with all of you to hear additional feedback on those public elements. How can you influence those elements that are included? So I just want to say on behalf of the entire Uplands team, we really appreciate your participation. We appreciate your collaboration in this process. And we continue to look forward to work with you and build a community that we can all be very proud of. So unless anybody wants a last word here, if I see anybody on the team who needs anything, okay. Go right ahead, Chad.
Quick note. I think Chad had a note, and then it's Saturday, November 14th is the next charrette, not Wednesday, November 18th. That'd be the second charrette, but Saturday, November 14th is the first time in which you can give us feedback. Two notes on that. Please go to the resources page of our website and get yourself the schematic design package. You'll see monumentation, park design, lots of stuff we didn't go over today that we're going to go over in November. Two, it's going to be a more interactive format. You're going to be able to live give us feedback that we can see and interact with, and we'll break into smaller groups. That's what I would just wanted to add, Marcus. We're excited about that November event, and the key to it is do a little homework and go to that resources page and download the schematic design package. Thank you.
Terrific. We didn't have to mute anybody's microphone tonight. We didn't try to talk over to each other too much. So I think we did great. So our dates are correct. Just go to uplandscolorado.com, goes to the news and events, and you can sign up for those charrettes with the correct date. Chad is going to finish us up and say goodnight.
You bet. I just wanted to point out that we will post the recording of this video again for folks who didn't hear earlier. We'll post this to our resources page on the Uplands Colorado website, as well as the slide deck from tonight. There are two different documents. The schematic design package that Jeff and everybody have referred to is there now. These slides and the recording of this presentation will be on in the next day or so. So with that, Marcus.
All right. You got it. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your attendance. Have a great evening. Good night, everyone.